on, Foxy. It's your birthday. Not for real, just for play. This is Cree Summer, and Moana Nui will be right back.
Hui, aloha mai kako, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Moana Nui Podcast. My name is Moana, and I'll be your host tonight. Our topic today is our Indigenous Legal Insight segment, and tonight we're going to be talking about nonprofit law. Um, this is a topic I think, being a community focused podcast that I see, a lot of our community organizations perform their work in the community through the mechanism of a nonprofit organization. And so I think this is something that hopefully will be helpful to folks who are either already working within the organization or who are considering forming one around their ideas and their passions that they have for the community and the things that they want to do within it. So um, please feel free to engage, ask questions throughout the episode as always. And we will do our best to answer those for you. And then if you have a question that maybe is too sensitive and you do not want to ask it on camera, but you still want to get more information, you can email that question to moananuipodcast@gmail.com, and we will have Kumu Manu reach out to you and try to her best to answer those questions. So with that said, I'm gonna bring her on. Kumu Manu, our resident law expert. Mahalo nui, good to see you, sis. How are things
Always.
going with you today?
Yeah, good. Usual rat race.
I hear that. I hear that.
Yes.
Yes. So tonight we wanted to talk about nonprofits. And I think I know for me, like I for one have considered doing a nonprofit, but it seems like a lot. And so I thought it'd be good to talk about this topic, help people to kind of understand like what they're in for when they're forming one, maybe a little bit about the good, the bad, the ugly of it, when they can be beneficial, but the things that you also need to take into consideration, maybe even before forming one. So I guess with that said, what are some first, what is a nonprofit? And then maybe like some things that you should be planning for and keeping in mind when you're thinking about forming one.
Well, what we want to talk about today is just kind of do an introduction to what a nonprofit entity looks like. We've done a show previously on corporate entities or limited liability companies. So a nonprofit is an organization that operates for public or social benefit rather than for profit. It's under the Internal Revenue Code 503C. 3 that we hear about, but the C subsection, if you were to look it up and just do a quick search on the Internal Revenue Code 501C, you'll see there's a lot of different designations as far as nonprofits, which we won't go over today, but it depends on the type of nonprofit that you have. Obviously, C3 is the subsection, subpart 3 is the most popular in the US. I think the government, because it's not taxable, they expect you to put that money back into the nonprofit organization so that you can further fund the good work that you're doing in the community. So that's the whole purpose behind this. And there's other like Native American nonprofits too that also add benefit to the Indigenous, just not the Native Hawaiian community. So examples that say sectors that you'll find nonprofits, and I have a list because it's really long: education, research, health, wellness, environment, conservation, the arts, culture, advocacy and civil rights, animal welfare, faith-based organizations. All churches are nonprofits, international development, sports and recreation, science, technology, and of course, social services. So we see this a lot with helping our community in the instances of like women, that are battered and need assistance, those that are less economically set up to where they're looking for education and trying to get into the workplace, especially if they're possibly even minors, those that have been emancipated. So if you look throughout our world, we'll find a nonprofit that operates in one of these sectors, that maybe even has a specialty.
Yes, definitely. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, sis, but I think one of the surprising ones to me that I found that was a nonprofit is the NBA, and I was like, oh, there's lots of profit going there.
Lots of profit. Well, I guess if you fulfill the criteria, anyone can really operate as a nonprofit. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So with that said, like, what are some of the criteria, I guess, and then, yeah, let's just start with that.
Okay. Well, I think, if you're thinking about forming a nonprofit, there's obviously good reason to. You're not taxed, but there's also a caveat to that, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's the mission statement. Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Mission and vision. Why do you want to possibly become a nonprofit? Whether it's for profit or nonprofit, you need to ask yourselves these questions anyway, and to get a good, clear picture of what you want to offer the world. And so it's defining a mission and vision of the nonprofit is the foundational step. And its formation, and it sets the tone for its goals, activities, and overall impact. So the mission should be clear, actionable, and very brief, about 1 to 2 sentences. So I wrote down an example here would be the American Red Cross. We all know that that's a nonprofit, and their mission statement is to, quote, prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors, end quote. So you can see that's a lot, but they really, in just that one sentence, encapsulate all that they stand for. And so that's the mission. That's what and I think, as you start to, as you operate as a nonprofit, it's always good annually to go back to that when you're making your annual plan to say, are we still operating in this mission, or has it changed? Has the environment and the temperature changed in our society where we need to maybe amend that slightly? So next would be the purpose of the organization. The key is to focus on the present and adjust as needed. What the organization does, who it serves, and how it makes an impact. So very important. What does it do? Who does it serve? And what's the impact of that service? So using the Red Cross, again, as an example, its purpose is to protect life and health and to ensure respect for the human being. So again, checking on that annually, if not quarterly. Are these events that we're planning, is this spend, are these volunteers, is this affiliation in line with protecting life and health and ensuring respect for all human beings? So pretty beautiful statement. They've been around for a while, so they've been able to craft it and hone it and really make it theirs. So third would be a vision statement. And as an example, again, to be always there in times of need. So this is what they do for us in our world. And so outlining the ideal future of your organization, what you seek to create with this organization, aspirational and forward-looking always, but also having your eyes on the long-term project, and also succession plans. We'll talk a little bit about, like, I have a fear of a nonprofit for a reason of the board calling the shots and not necessarily the founder.
Mm.
And when the board is calling the shots, it can actually change in purpose, mission, its focus, as well as remove the founder. If they find that the founder will not evolve, or it could be just cattiness, right? The board takes over and can remove the founder. So just remember that. We can talk a little bit more about that later. But so as an example, a health nonprofit, the mission would be to provide free mental health resources and counseling to underserved populations. The matching vision statement of that would be a society where mental health care is accessible to all. And so you can see how they go hand in hand. Steps to define the mission is to identify the core purpose, like we talked about. Why does this profit exist? Is it adding anything? And so the Red Cross's purpose is to, quote, to help prevent and alleviate human suffering and to protect life and health, end quote. So you can see, again, it's very focused on, and it's very broadly written so that they can operate. They're not necessarily handcuffing themselves. So to give yourself a little bit of room when you are, in fact, putting your mission statement together. A good way to do this is to focus on a problem. What is a problem in our community right now? And where is it not being served? So focus on the problem, address it, and add those specific solutions to the nonprofit so it can serve properly. And of course, this changes with your geographical location, right? So, and also cultural norms, right? What would be accepted and what, if the help was there versus it not being accepted. So clarifying your target audience, very, very important. And being very specific about this. You can always add more audiences and categories later, but I wouldn't go too much into it initially when you first formed, so that you can actually hit some targets and feel like you're doing good things. And then those things can actually lead you to helping others in the same realm or sector, but in a different way. And it can help fund those things as well. So always good to get some funding in, which we'll talk about in a little bit, so that you can expand as needed. So defining who the nonprofits work will benefit: children, seniors, underserved communities, animals, the environment, and I'll add women there, given all that's going on in our climate right now in the US. Decision making also is important. Obviously, you don't just want to say yes to everything, or affiliations that come in that may not align with your current purpose. So always back to your core purpose, your values, mission statement, and making sure that you're not aligning with someone that has a questionable background, reputation, and maybe not verified integrity, because that can bring any nonprofit down, whether they're established and have been around for a long time or they're new. But when you're new, it's very, very important to know who you're doing business with, and not to be taken for that. So also attracting stakeholders. And this means donors, volunteers, partners, affiliates. And this is very important to make it broad enough, but also very succinct, to where if someone on the outside is looking to get involved, whether it's time or funding, that they would be inclined to help. Like, that's an organization I really want to be a part of. And what do they need? How can I volunteer? How will my money be used? What is the greatest need? So making sure that your social media and your website is up to date, so that you have your most needed items, whether they're products or services, on the website, so that someone can get on and say, you know what, and also having a button there, I want to, or I want to donate, so that they don't have to search your website for that as well. And of course, monthly in the meetings, whoever needs to be there, that you can decide that, making sure that these benchmarks of success are being met, and that you're still aligning with your purpose, making sure that there's no waste in operations, and that everyone is it's interesting, doing their job, I should say. For some reason, I think that there are individuals out there that think that working for a corporation versus a nonprofit is a lot easier, right? To work for the nonprofit, you don't have to do much. You're not on the clock, and actually, it's exactly the same. That's not how it goes. And when you're working for someone, an organization that is benefiting, the community as a whole, even more so, you should be diligent with showing up to work, whether you're a part-time, full-time staff member receiving funds that are donated or raised through the organization, or if you're a volunteer. If you're going to come and you're going to work or you're going to volunteer, show up and give it your best. Don't think because it's not Google or Facebook or some of these tech companies or a larger medical provider that the work that you do isn't important. It's extremely important. It's actually probably more important in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. Do you have any questions or comments on that, sis, so far?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think that the work that nonprofits do is extremely important. My personal view, like, they're probably not compensated enough. Because, well, I'm sure we're gonna get into the funding piece, but yeah, a lot of the work is very important. But one thing that I did pick up on, like, originally of what you said was that one of the, I don't know if you call it a downside or just a consideration,
Yeah.
is that when you're forming the nonprofit, that the board of directors can remove the founder. Like, they can influence the direction of who founded it in the beginning. And I think that's one of, not just that in and of itself, but just the whole, um like selecting a board of directors. How do you choose them? What should you be looking for? Um and then, like you said, pettiness, right? Like, when there's
Where there's
disagreement.
humans, there's pettiness.
Exactly. And I think that's, like with anything, like we said, like doing a nonprofit or even a business, like either formation or mechanism, like, it requires a lot of work and things that you're gonna be investing your time and energy into. um and so you definitely want to choose the right people, and make sure that there is that alignment, and that trust in ultimately, like, what you want the nonprofit to do. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways.
So far.
And yeah,
That was
sure.
my big takeaway. I'll just share personally. So I started NACOA Inc., which was a nonprofit, and that was for the protection, education, and preservation of the Hawaiian lua, which is our indigenous warrior art. And it is a cultural practice, just not a martial arts like we see today. But with that, if I was to select a board and could be elders of different lineages. We don't really need much, maybe a technology person, maybe a finance person, but definitely it would be more specialized, extremely specialized in the art and the cultural practice. So let's say hypothetically that we vote in maybe 3 or 4 that I recommended, and 2 of those happen to be my students, and 1 is an elder of a different lineage that maybe when the nonprofit starts to do really great, is not so happy that one lineage is doing better than the other. Or hypothetical, I'm not saying this would ever happen because I did dissolve my nonprofit for this specific reason. But let's say those 2 students that have specialty in maybe medicine, because that's definitely a study of the warriors, and another maybe of technology, and something happens. Their COA journey doesn't go very well. They decide to leave NACOA, and but they decide to stay on the board. And so we've got this conflict now. How do I put in the bylaws so specifically to anticipate what might be the issue, which one of them it might be, to then provide me for the guidebook of how to remove them and have the board vote? It's not just up to me anymore. Versus if I form NACOA Inc. and it is a for-profit corporation, then I am in full control of the way it's going, how fast it's going, how slow it's going. If I need to maybe remove the silo of plant medicine from the study for this time period and then bring it back, I want to have say about everything, because I'm the one that's the bearer of the cultural knowledge, and it's very important. So while the nonprofit can receive funding for such things as preserving our cultural arts and our language and everything that we're trying so desperately to bring back with more fervor, to enrich our own people's lives, and to erase some of the generational trauma, we won't have access to those federal funds as a for-profit. As a nonprofit, you will. But like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty there as far as control. For-profit, you will have to make for profit. Everything will have to be fundraising. You will have to pay taxes. There's a lot more, less financial, but more financial. I don't know how to explain it. You will be responsible for the fiscal, how do I say, liquidity. Okay.
Mhm.
So you'll have to just continue to partner with those that are willing to donate, that won't receive a tax benefit, a write-off. However, on the nonprofit side, it's not like you just get a grant and it's free money. You just throw it in the bank and spend it however you want. You have to account for every penny. You have to document with videos, agendas, attendance sheets, and photographs of how that money was spent. And so there's a lot of back end. If you have a nonprofit, I would highly suggest having someone, not necessarily on the board, but someone that is serving in a non-volunteer capacity, in a part-time capacity as needed, to handle the bookkeeping, controlling of the account, payments to everyone, including staff, and also to report on funding. And there's audits that take place federally, and that individual will have to prepare the report, the audit, and submit it in proper time. And that is usually after the funds. You have a period of time to spend the funds, and you have a period of time after the funds are spent to report back to the federal government. So, and taxes. This is nowhere in my notes tonight, but we'll just go over it. Taxes. You still have to file, and showing zero. It's not that you don't have to file, but that's also $200 to $500 annually. That's a spend for the organization. So, of course, a write-off, but nonetheless, it's a spend. It's a write-off for both corporations, profit and nonprofit. So that's something else to think about too, is hiring someone that you trust, that maybe there's another second pair of eyes on this staff member that can handle the grueling part of reporting back of how you spent that specific grant. So things to consider here. One is not easier than the other. In fact, I tend to believe that the nonprofit is more work.
Agreed.
So having someone in an admin position as well, part-time, that stays with it, that doesn't let things fall beyond a week, because it's just too much then. And I know things happen in people's lives, but if they can't get to it, there needs to be someone cross-trained on it so they can handle it on weeks, or pick up the slack. Maybe, employee one handled partial, and then the employee two will pick up on the remaining. And this is extremely important, because to go back and try to recreate these documents and what you did, and you're not a criminal, it's just that you fell behind, but now you can't remember. There's documents all thrown in, records all thrown into one box, not really sure what goes with what. Waiting too long is a problem, and you could lose your standing as a nonprofit if you're not diligently governing over it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I've heard that from many folks who have run the nonprofit. It's a lot of work, and a lot more chances of scrutiny, and all of that stuff. And so that's another another thing that has kind of kept me from doing it. It's just like, I don't know that I have the bandwidth, to like manage
It's a
all.
lot.
It's a lot. I think for a lot of my work, it's probably why, like even the podcast when we started, like I wasn't getting paid for it. It was a nonprofit. It wasn't a for-profit. It was just a thing.
He was not making any profit. Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah, so there's benefits, like more money, more problems, right? So yeah. But
Yeah,
thanks for
different
explaining
problems
that.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a concern of mine, and that's why I dissolved mine. I couldn't let it go too long without assigning, like at least recommending a board, putting them in place, and then getting everyone together today is really difficult too. If they're
Mm,
not paid, and even if they're paid, they choose not to come to
yeah,
the board meetings, but we need a quorum. We need
right.
a majority amount of board members there to move forward on certain initiatives. And that can, especially in an annual meeting, that is painful, because you need to actually rule on these things immediately so that you can go ahead and trickle that down from the board level to the executive level, so that those that are actually doing the work every day, because it's not the board, it's the executives and volunteers, that at least, you have a director that can at least direct everything and all the different silos of what's happening. it within the nonprofit. But if you don't have all of the directors there for a quorum and then have to revisit it, then everything gets put on hold. And that's, time is money, right? And we won't impact as much if we're screwing around on the back end. So yeah, very important. There's some key positions that really need to be put in place, depending on your type of nonprofit.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. Like, is there a minimum amount of board directors that you have to have, or does that differ based on the type?
Based on the type, but also I would check with the state. I don't, actually, it's not my area of law. I just know,
Oh.
I just know quite a bit about it. But I can look it up if someone's asking for a specific state, which brings me to incorporation. So you still have to incorporate. There's nothing, you don't just get to operate. It's still the same as if you're, filing for a for-profit corporation or LLC. So, choosing a name, seeing if it's available, filing the articles of organization with the applicable state. Some states are more expensive in their filing fee than others. And draft the bylaws. The bylaws are very important. I can't overstate this enough. It's also very scary as well. And I'll give you the flip side of the coin. The foundational document, just like an LLC, an operating agreement. This is the operating agreement, but it's called bylaws. And I think different states call it different things. It can be synonymous. But these bylaws are extremely important. It tells you how to operate, how to hire, how to fire, when to file your taxes, when to seek extension on those, how you can, who's eligible to be on the board at what time. You can even restrict yourself further and say that only once a year you can elect a new board member unless there's a life emergency. I wouldn't do that because that restricts you too much, but it also shows you how to remove a director, which is extremely important. If they have missed 2 meetings and they're going through something, they haven't taken a sabbatical and they haven't responded, or they've responded with an excuse that's not good enough, they're not fulfilling their duty, then how do you remove them? Is it 3? Is it 5 meetings? And this is really important to lay out in the bylaws. Otherwise, you're stuck with that director who's either absent, causing issues, or actually combating certain initiatives that the nonprofit wants to move forward to. So now this goes to court. Now you've got to file breach of fiduciary duty to try to get the judge to remove this director. So it's like, oh, I'll just have my buddy Tom and my friend Cynthia, and they're just on the board. We just have coffee once a year, even on the phone. We just say, oh, that sounds good, and we're done. And then I prepare, the minutes of the annual meeting. And then what happens? Success happens sometimes, and success breeds contention with some of our friends. And when we put friends on the board and they see, that you're doing well, the nonprofit, it's not you, but what you birthed is doing well. And then something changes in the relationship, and it's no longer a nonprofit club. Now it's actually a nonprofit, and you actually have to perform. We're not just getting together like a book club. This is not that, talking about issues in the world and trying to solve them. No, you're actually making a bona fide difference. And this changes people. It changes board members. So yeah, the bylaws are extremely important. They can be as lengthy or as short as you wish. I would say err in the center and be very concise. But also know this: if the nonprofit gets sued for any reason whatsoever, I'm not even talking about risk management insurance right now, I'm just talking on operations. Guess what? The plaintiff's attorney is going to get you there on the stand and say, Chairwoman, if you're the founder, can you turn to page 57 of your bylaws, which is way too long, by the way. Page 57 of the bylaws, section 2, 27, section 5, subsection E. Can you read that for me? Okay, so you read it. It's very clear on how to operate here. And you're defending yourself now. And he'll just say, did you follow this in the instance of plaintiff? Well, no, but yes or no. If the answer is no, you have liability. So very, very important, these bylaws. It's not just like go to LegalZoom and draft them. You really need to look at each provision and make sure that they apply to your nonprofit. So that's my spiel on bylaws. I can't emphasize enough how important they are. What's wrong with you, sis?
I'm like, oh my God, all I hear is headaches.
Everything's a headache these days. It's crazy.
I know. I'm like, can I just be human? Can I just be a person?
And if you don't file the bylaws, then you're in jeopardy of losing your nonprofit status too.
Yeah.
So if there's updates, we need to update those and keep them in the corporate records book. And iterations. There's always somewhat of a parliamentarian on staff, whether they're volunteer or actually getting paid. And they keep all of the different iterations and edits, modifications, amendments, and resolutions that are adopting those changes.
Mm-hmm.
And those are always with the prior bylaws. So it's not like, oh, that one's done, we don't apply. No, because guess what? If you do get sued and the current bylaws don't apply to that time when that volunteer fell, the employee is alleging wage and hour issues, another employee was sexually harassed and it was the director, so you have fiduciary duty, like it rolls up. Like if it happened right before statute of limitations, but that's no longer your policy. Hopefully you made changes every time these things came through, right? To better yourself. You actually have to keep that and show that that's what it was, and that you did abide by the bylaws and operations at that time the incident occurred. So there's usually a parliamentarian that, directs the meeting, make sure that things are passed, seconded and passed, and they keep records of everything.
Yep. Sounds like a lot of work. Okay.
Yeah, literally have to have a team. One person can't. I mean, you obviously have to have a board, and then of course, the founder can serve as all executives. But yeah, it's very difficult. Managing personalities as well. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, managing personalities, that part. Yep, that's yeah. I do enough of that in my day job, so no, but I mean, when you have alignment, obviously nonprofits are awesome.
Yes.
I like to focus on the actual work. It's the all of the back house paperwork thing that is like very daunting to me, like.
Trust me, I know. I am aware. Even with my group, I have to upload, I have to respond to emails and handle the money and, making sure the payments are coming through and a credit card has expired. And then,
Right.
uploading all of the classes to the online classroom that has close to 800 classes in it now. And it has to be cataloged of what we went over, and it's just like the back end just will suck the life right out of you. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
But mahalo for you to, for like creating 800 videos of Lua. That's freaking awesome.
Well, they're class recordings. That's how many classes have happened.
Yeah.
So, and then students get to go back. I call that the frozen food. They get to go back and study it when they can. If they can't make class or they're looking for something, it's there. So
Yeah, no, that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Talk about preservation.
Well, it will survive me. So that's the hope, is that I don't know any other Lua, a Kumu Lua, that has documented like I have. And so hopefully it will help our people and my students continue after I'm gone. And it's the back end Lua. It's not the public Lua. This is the cultural sacred, where, the students get to see it, where they've been they went through the application process and they have integrity and respect, and they won't misuse it, and they won't share it for profit, or, for any reason. Frankly, there's a kapu that's over the haumana.
Right.
And so, yeah, they have access to that whenever they're 24/7. I'm not 24/7, but that's 24/7.
I mean, that was a smart move on your part, right? Like creating the repository, because you don't want to be called on 24/7. Nobody wants to be called on that often.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful.
So any questions on the board of directors? Because I can go over a little bit more. We can move straight into meetings and how
Yeah,
we
we can
keep.
talk about meetings.
Okay. So regularly scheduled, you can do monthly, you can do quarterly, but there's minimum an annual meeting. I would suggest doing it quarterly at the minimum, not annually. I spoke about having a quorum, which is the minimum amount of directors present to pass something that has been brought to the floor or the table to move forward on certain things. It's good and bad. It could be removal of a director, a firing of an employee, deciding to link and affiliate with a sponsor or a donator, like someone that donates that has a questionable corporation or
Mm.
personal background. So to actually have that all prepared for the directors so that they can review what's on paper before them or put it up on the screen. Paper can be a little hairy. If the person that you're discussing has an ally on the board, you don't want to allow those papers outside of the boardroom. So, and pictures of the same. So confidentiality, very, very important. So this is where the majority, and if you're not there as a board member, then you don't get to vote on it. You can abstain if you're there and you don't want to go either way. You can go yes or yay or nay. And so voting procedures will be held by the parliamentarian usually, making sure that he or she is documenting who voted yes and who voted no and who abstained. And that's in the minutes. And from that point forward, you can move on the next morning, have the director of the nonprofit speak with the executives and all the staff members about what was passed, what has changed, and what their new roles are in making that happen. So it's exciting when the voting goes well, The annual meeting, what they discuss is the organization's performance. They remove and elect directors, and directors also resign. And they address strategic goals for the following year, which usually are addressed quarterly. So what's, 1Q, 2Q, what's the focus? Who do we need to make it happen? And jobs are assigned at that time, tasks, so that everyone is moving forward. Record keeping, again, minutes of all meetings. And there is a meeting I haven't discussed, and that's an emergency meeting. So it would be a special meeting of the board of directors when someone has passed away that is served in any capacity. If there has been fraud where the corporate bank account has been accessed and drained, maybe a phishing attempt where it compromised the internal systems of the nonprofit, gaining access to volunteer information, every place that we've held an event, you name it. When a special meeting is called, it is called and it's within an hour or as soon as possible, as reasonably possible. And so there is a phone tree where everyone would probably not meet in person, but it would be on Zoom, video or even on the phone. And there would be an audio or video vote while this meeting takes place on how to move forward, what the priorities are, and who will do that. And so at that moment, then they'll reach out to those staff members and the director to make sure that this is immediately handled. So record keeping is extremely important, whether it's, in-person meeting, it's scheduled, or it's a special meeting of the board of directors. Financial management. So budgeting, and the board approves the annual budget to ensure alignment with the mission and the initiatives of each quarter. Sometimes there's always a contingency. Usually 25% is sufficient, but there are also, if the nonprofit owns their own building, real estate, if they're renting and there's maybe another renter across the way had the pipe burst and now has caused issues. So there are some things that the nonprofit will have to pay for initially as a renter and get reimbursed through insurance, or maybe possibly even the landlord. That can take years. And also if you own it, then that's all on you. You can access some of your insurance and make a claim, Or, even just the water heater going out, there's $5,500 just like that. So it's really important to have money set aside for the physical location. But making sure that there's money for the mission of the nonprofit for the following year. And that really gives a good idea of how much fundraising and what grants are needed, the amount of grants, and who will handle that. So financial oversight is the treasurer, someone that's been elected to the board and serves as a treasurer. And there is also usually a finance committee that goes along with that oversees the treasurer's work to make sure there isn't a penny missing, because you know what that looks like on a financial statement after a period of time. So cash flow, expenses, and compliance. So making sure that it's the line items are proper, especially if you're receiving grants, so that you can see the moment to moment spend of the grant money. And that could be anything from golf balls for an event to, the more important items, clothing for, it depends on what the nonprofit does. Regular financial reporting to the board. This is monthly. Some do it quarterly, but I find that leaves room for human error, maybe not even on purpose, but also for impropriety and lack of diligence on the treasurer's part or the finance committee's part of making sure. More eyes are always better than just one pair of eyes or several pairs of eyes. Again, the relationship between the treasurer and the second pair of eyes needs to be looked at as well. If they're good friends, there could be something else going on if the money is not adding up. So very important to have extra eyes and in the finance committee look at these things and to make sure it's correct before it goes before the board. The last thing that you want is distrust and doubt in your treasurer's ability to do his or her job. Then it reflects poorly on the chairman, chairwoman, and the board as a whole. And the board is ultimately tasked with financial responsibility. They are responsible for looking at each line item and making sure that it's being spent properly and legally. So I would suggest monthly. That's what I would suggest. And then annual audits and financial reviews, especially for when you grow into a very large nonprofit, extremely important. This should be handled outside of the house, meaning third-party vendors should be hired. This is also an expense and a line item that you definitely need to account for. Try to get a flat fee when you negotiate this, because if it is complicated and there are grants, if the record keeping isn't proper, you'll rack that fee up later with independent audits, financial professionals. So you want to make sure that, that's gonna happen whether you like it or not. Yeah, the audits, forensic even too, when things aren't taken care of, and then the recreation of all of that, making sure it's proper is very important. Documenting that, especially if your nonprofit status is in question by the IRS or by the state.
Gotcha.
Okay, conflicts of interest policy. So ensuring directors, officers, and staff do not use their position for personal gain. This also, the policy, the conflict of a COI, conflict of interest policy requires disclosure and recusal of decisions involving personal interests. So say the director needs someone immediately to, a wall has fallen, and her cousin is a general contractor and can get out there immediately, would drop everything for her. But the payment cannot come through the director. If this is what happens after the CEO or executive director of the nonprofit says, do it now. We have kids coming in for a tour. We have the women that, that are here for counseling, for rape, whatever it is, get the wall fixed. We'll move it over to this location, get it fixed by close of business. Just need to make sure that there's no conflicts of interest there. You can still hire, he or she can still hire their cousin, but it's got to be approved. It can't just be one person making that call and setting the amount and also rendering payment. So, and directing the treasurer to make the payment. So
Right.
these are obvious things for some of us, but others don't know about this, that would actually be a conflict of interest. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So would like to talk now about people and human resources, if
Yep.
that's okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So like I said, the board makes the decisions, they set the tone, and it's the majority that will set what the nonprofit will seek to go after the future year. But then it trickles down. Those orders are trickled down with some autonomy to how to make this happen. And that goes to the executives. And I'm seeing more and more CEO titles in nonprofits when before it used to be executive director. You
Mm.
see both the ED or the CEO, they're synonymous. It just depends on how you wish to title that main executive.
Yeah, I wondered about that because I'd seen both, and I was like, what's the
Yeah,
difference? Yeah.
yeah. And so the executive director or the CEO is tasked with hiring all staff and approving all vendors and all volunteers. And so this is a really important job. This person has all the qualities of very conscientious, integrous, respectful individual, especially to the needs of the nonprofit. So if it's, for construction classes for kids, so they can get off the video games, you don't necessarily need to have certain emotional qualities, emotional intelligence to to have that nonprofit versus dealing with women
Mhm.
that maybe have recently been rescued from sex trafficking. So, different needs on the CEO and executive director. But they're the ones that decide who they hire, how they're managed, and they're in charge of implementing all of the policies that govern that. Um, Staff and volunteers, the CEO will lay out clear job descriptions, the training for those volunteers and staff members, and performance evaluations. But they also ensure on onboarding that based on the nonprofit, like if it's for minors, you actually have to do a live scan. There's no way around it. If there are minors, you want to make sure that they don't have previous convictions or have been sued criminally and got off for an allegation. So this is also something that has to do with staff members and people in general, whether they're paid or unpaid. And also reviewing, having the final say of, not just performance reviews, but how they're terminated as well, how
Mm.
investigations are handled, how conflict is handled, and harassment's a really big thing, especially like in Hawaii and California. Even if, say, I said something to you and you thought, oh, sis, you're crazy, ha 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 ha, but someone else heard it and they were uncomfortable, they can actually file a complaint against me for saying it. They were in the environment and it made them feel uncomfortable. And
Mm.
so those sort of things have to be investigated immediately. They have to. And so training the staff that will handle that, maybe someone that's, like a specialist that can handle it and be there for the employees and volunteers, but also maybe if it grows so large, maybe even having a chief of staff so that they're the point person and the CEO is relieved of having to manage that. Also whistleblowing, document retention and ethics. These have to, sexual harassment, abiding by your states in which you incorporated to make sure that you're meeting all those deadlines. You're not exempt from training staff and keeping a safe and healthy work environment just because we're a nonprofit. Making sure that they're all aligned in the mission constantly, maybe starting with that in every staff meeting. Mission alignment. And that's pretty much it for people. It's constant. You know that. So
Yes.
making sure that they're willing when you hire them to handle certain things and not being picky about it. Because as the nonprofit needs shift, so do the roles.
Hmm.
And it's not about the person, it's about what needs to get done and who can fulfill that role. But sometimes you see that it's really about the person, just giving them things to handle, and they're not invested and they don't have integrity with fulfilling those duties. So
Yeah, just like whether it's a nonprofit, a for-profit, any entity, really, like the hiring decisions are super important.
extremely important, yes.
Yeah.
And with everyone getting easily offended today. This is a very hard environment to navigate in.
Yeah.
Before we just had generational differences of interpretation, but now it's very complicated. So yeah, hats off to whoever handles that. So I want to talk about funding now,
Yep.
accepting donations. So online platforms, no brainer, but some are still not really operating in this way. They're terrified of online financial platforms, which is a shame. And if you are in charge of a nonprofit or thinking about founding a nonprofit, I would actually hire someone else that can handle this, making sure that the treasurer has eyes on. So PayPal, Venmo, Zelle is from a individual, can be to a corporation. Dedicated software, having the actual cart built into the website. There's also Stripe and Square, and there's so many different online platforms in which a nonprofit can receive donations. Now, someone on staff then receives that, or the treasurer will say, "We received this," issue them a tax-free certificate so that they can include that in their tax return. So someone has to follow up with that and make sure that those are being mailed out weekly, if not daily, so that you don't lose track of that. Because if that individual donates and they put that they donated on their tax return and the IRS sees that, but they don't see where you've given that certificate, again, fines, violations, and if it's a repeated offense, you will lose the nonprofit status.
Interesting.
So yeah, more things to think about. And, donations, fundraising, different campaigns. They could be virtual, they could be in person, they could be a hybrid virtual beginning and then getting together in person, using peer-to-peer, word of mouth. Even, I hate to say it, if it's focused on the elderly, they're not going to see it on social media most likely. So you're going to have to print out flyers and make a print budget for that. So getting the word out, really getting it out there, having everyone share on all their platforms if you can. And so applying for grants, identifying grant opportunities. This usually, you can search thousands and thousands and thousands of grants to try to find what you're looking for. You can put in key identifiers that may help you identify some, but my suggestion is to actually, hire a grant writer that has access to the database. And that is a paid database that grant writers subscribe to, because their work is dedicated to this. They don't have hours and hours to go searching through. So hire a grant writer to identify grant opportunities for local, state, and federal grants. So there are different types of grants. There's not just federal grants, which I think most people think it's just federal. There's also grants that are offered by other nonprofit foundations, for-profit foundations, and corporations. And we know that in for-profit corporations, they always have a line item in there for donations to nonprofits. It also helps their end of year fiscal reporting when they get to write that off. So definitely take a look at the media, inquire with larger corporations, Fortune 100s, that may have an entire web page on their website dedicated to corporate grants. Look at the criteria and sick your grant writer on that and have him or her start preparing, start asking for the information that's needed from the CEO in each functional item, or a silo that handles certain and is keeper of that information. Writing strong grant proposals extremely important. So you can't just rush through it. And usually when you see it, you're like under the gun and like, oh my God, I only have so many days, or this is due in 6 hours. Call in reinforcements to help there when you're at the nonprofit, and ask for individuals to handle certain portions of it, and maybe even ask your grant writer with a rush fee to drop everything, and he or she can handle it immediately and submit it within time. So clear objectives, measurable outcomes, budget, and sustainability plan. How, again, does this fold into and support and reinforce your mission and core values? So always keeping that at the forefront. So also, I know that the local, state, federal, and corporations, foundations, they're more inclined to donate if they see others have donated. So having a diversified sources of income, possibly a subscription for regular information that the public doesn't normally get. Memberships. So maybe there's tiers of membership and what they receive. Sponsorship is another one. So maybe they get to come to the annual gala fundraiser. So pretty important. That's all tied into that fee of being a sponsor. So many different ways to diversify and bring income in, just solely based on who the nonprofit is versus looking for outside money. That tends to be something you want to do as a supplement. First and foremost is, how can you raise funds, and how do you keep that bank account in the black and not in the red, and how do you ensure to keep 6 months of operating expenses in the bank account, because anything can happen. That's very, very important. So nonprofits can find grants through a variety of sources, including online databases, government agencies, foundations, and local organizations. And Moana, you could go ahead and put that up if you haven't already. There are platforms that specialize in connecting nonprofits with funding opportunities. And so what you'll see on your screen are 5 that are well-known, well-respected, and very instrumental in helping nonprofits identify funding opportunities. So that saves lots of hours, but you still have to do the work. You still have to get in there and look at the requirements, deadline, and all this supplemental information that needs to be attached to that grant.
So I'll name the sources for those who are listening and not watching. Foundation Directory Online, which is a comprehensive database of grant makers and their past funding history. Grant Station, which provides tools to find and write grant proposals for private and government funding. 3, grants.gov, which is the official U.S. government's website for federal grant opportunities. 4, it looks like Instrumental, no A at the end. It's Instrumental without the A. Curated grant listings tailored to your nonprofit's mission and organization, or mission and location. I'm sorry. And then 5, Candid offers insights into foundations and grant opportunities, including grant webinars. So those are some good ones. There's another one that of course, if I had prepared for this ahead of time, there's one where I'm on a newsletter and I'm on the free version. So they give they highlight a couple of different grant opportunities, and then if you subscribe to their service, then they have a more detailed listing. But actually on that one, I saw one, I think it was for the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And so that one was one that we were hoping to go after, but we need to have a fiscal sponsor since we have not pursued our nonprofit status. But that's definitely one that we would be interested in partnering with a nonprofit on in the future, because it's definitely in alignment with the podcast and the work that we're already doing. It would help us pursue some projects that we have in mind that we want to do, but just haven't had the time to go and pursue them yet. Yeah. Oh, sis, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, duh. Okay. So yeah, there's again federal, state, local, and then private foundations. So check. Keep checking for all sorts of community-focused initiatives and grants that are in your area of your nonprofit.
Oh, I found it. It's called Grants for Creators. I found them on Substack. So I'll just put up their email on top. So if you guys want to check that out. Of course, this is specific to creators, which is what we do. So just another resource for folks to check out.
That's wonderful. Good. You can always add more too, Moana, if you come up with some more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So some of the private foundations, I'm going to mention some have real issues with, but they do set aside money. It would be the Walmart Foundation, Google.org, Bank of
Mhm.
America Charitable Foundation. I would check under the philanthropy department there, the division that offers grants. For community foundations, you can look at, like, for instance, out here would be the Huntington Beach Community Foundation, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, the Hawaii Community Foundation. So there's
Mhm.
certain foundations out there that do have funds that can help. And then there's, of course, those hated family foundations, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. They do have some, they're so nice to set aside some money for us and to help the community. And then also, thinking about professional associations and industry groups like the American Public Health Association, the American Heart Association, and there's some for the arts, like you just put one up. That was great, for the environment, education. So it depends on, what the grant is for, but they're out there in some of these professional associations. They take some of their membership dues and set it aside to help others in the community. And so they do sometimes donate to nonprofits. Yeah, I think that's good. So philanthropy networks is another one. So groups like Council on Foundations or Independent Sector, that's actual group, Independent Sector. They can connect you with other nonprofits that have excess funding. So funding that they will not use, they don't want to report on it, they don't want to hold it. So they'll fund it to other nonprofits, which is really kind of a cool concept. So nonprofits helping nonprofits. And then, of course, other funding would be online crowdfunding and grant contests. So GoFundMe, Global Giving, and another one is Give Butter. Very interesting. They attract grassroots type of support, those that are very fanatical in certain causes, which is really wonderful. That's where you really want your money to come from. Those that really believe in what you're doing, not because there's a girl in a bikini on your website. All right. I'm just saying.
So true.
There's grant contests, PepsiCo, T-Mobile. They have one every year. I think maybe even Dana's company, Kimberly Clark,
Yes.
as well. So, looking to some of these grant contests. And that's pretty much all I have as far as the basics, but we really went into detail in some of these areas. And so any comments, sis, or questions? I may not know the answer, but I can find out.
No, yeah, I think it was super helpful. Hopefully, folks will get a lot of value in this because I think we did a good job of covering kind of like the legal aspects of it, but just some of the things to consider, like as someone who might be kind of toying with the idea or just wondering, like, is it worth it? The more information you have to make your decision is always helpful. And to have it, come from someone who has experience both as a former nonprofit and, as a legal professional, I think is helpful. And, it's like one of those things, like when you're afraid of something, but once it's like, okay, maybe it's not as scary. It's just,
It's true.
you gotta do, and you gotta be consistent.
Just check the boxes and you should be okay. Stay
Yeah.
consistent, stay conscious and thoughtful in everything you do.
Yeah.
Like our culture, this is what we do, how we lived in the Kapu. And look for free resources for nonprofits. There's some out there that actually will help you manage. There's QuickBooks has a free version for nonprofits, as well as Asana, which is more of the governance aspect. So these are really good resources, and there's more out there. I would read a lot of blogs too. I would read about the pitfalls, some of the recent articles that are out there. Even do it to the state specific, to where you want to incorporate, what's required annually of the nonprofit. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. We definitely appreciate you sharing your ike and your expertise with everyone. And yeah, I mean, you definitely helped me too. I'm just like, okay, just
Good.
demystifying a little, some of the things, and of course being part of, Papa Ololokahi. I'm learning, a lot of things from them too. And um I think that's actually another good tip. Like if you're thinking about forming a nonprofit, try to volunteer for one, or work alongside one, so that you can see some of the operations and the things that happen, um, and be able to help a good cause too, right? Like obviously, both of us, our culture and the perpetuation of it is definitely near and dear to our hearts. So to be able to do that and also get compensated for it, and put it right back into the community, um, is amazing. And I'm definitely grateful, to be a part of that. Even though, like we said, the back end stuff can be a headache.
It's miserable, but you know what? I think it's the fulfillment that one gets from working in a nonprofit
Yes.
that they believe in is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
That's what I lean on when I'm like, oh, I feel like the mana is being sucked out of me. But we're doing
it
good
is.
work though. Let's focus
Yes,
on all
yeah.
the good things that we
I don't know. I see some nonprofit. I saw one today, actually, the chief privacy officer making close to $300,000.
Girl.
So there are nonprofits, so, it's a nonprofit and it's like $20,000 less a year. That's not necessarily always the case. It's
Right.
not. And the perks are amazing. They're, so you get to really make a difference. And that fulfillment is something, there's something to be said about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of this episode. As always, if you have more questions about this particular topic, you can send them to moananuipodcast at gmail.com, and we will share that with Kumumanu, and she can try to help to ask. I'm sorry, to ask or answer those questions. Or I could even maybe we'll start doing some like mini episodes. So if you send in a question, Kumumanu can answer, and like in a shorter format, like a mini video that will be tailored just for you. Of course, we can keep you anonymous, right? Like question from caller, right?
Totally.
Nobody needs to know, but we can answer your question. So yeah, maybe that could be like a fun way that we could evolve some of this content, like in the future. Have folks like, caller, dial in, what's your question? Like something, or a submission or something. I
Yeah.
don't know. I was just trying to think of ways that make it fun.
Well, it's kind of nice too, because it's legal. So it comes in little like brownie sized pieces, little
Exactly.
bite-sized pieces, instead of like, oh my God, like she talks so much,
Which
so
is like when most people, when they hear like, oh, we're gonna bring in the lawyer, most people are like, they're here comes the fun suckers.
well, they say, goes to legal to die.
Yeah. Yes. All good ideas go to die.
Yeah. Terrible.
Oh,
There
all
are
right.
stereotypes for a reason, sis.
Yeah. Well, thank you for balancing out that stereotype, and showing both sides of yourself. But yeah, with that said, thank you so much again for sharing your time and for being a part of the Moana Nui Ohana. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. We definitely are appreciative and grateful for your contributions to our podcast, as well as to the community as a whole. So mahalo nui, sis. Alrighty, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, share. And we hope you guys will tune in next week. So yeah, let me make a quick announcement. So next week we are doing our 4th anniversary episode next Wednesday. So hopefully folks can come in. I'm hoping to make that one fun. So I don't know what it's gonna be like. I'm hoping that it'll be fun. Ask questions. Like, what's your favorite episode? What is your crazy episode? Like, what is something that somebody said that you were like, what is going on the Moana Nui podcast? Like all those kinds of things. We're gonna let our hair down a little bit. Try not to be as serious as we normally are, and just celebrate 4 years of podcast greatness. So definitely join us next Wednesday. Let me double check the time. 8:30 Eastern time. And so adjust it accordingly. Remember, on daylight savings, so one hour less than usual. And then another thing that's being celebrated on that day, well, 2 more things. The second thing is Moana 2 is coming out. So I'm so excited for
Ooh.
part 2 of the Disney Moana movie. And she has a sister this time. So it's so cute. I can't wait to see it. So definitely excited for that to come out. And then it's my dad's birthday. So I have to celebrate my dad. He's no longer here, but he is a big part of what I do. So three great things to celebrate.
Yeah, it's my daughter's birthday.
Stop it. Happy birthday to your daughter. What's her name?
Malia.
Ooh, happy birthday, Malia. How oli lahan now? I'm going to say it early in case we forget to do it on Wednesday.
So cute. Amazing. Same birthday. Amazing.
Yes, awesome. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop vala'awing now and I'm going to let you all go. What? This is what you get with Hawaiians. Like, just when we think we pow, we're not really pow. But yes, take care. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will see you guys next time. Mahalo. Ahui ho, everybody. I'm not ready, you guys. It's been a while since I've run this thing. Hold on. Let me find my outro. And bloopers out.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then. When they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves a republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the Native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if you put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course. Cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
Sorry, guys. You've been watching me this whole time. Tonight is not my night. A hui ho for real. See you later.